Advisory Committee on Trees, June the 14th.
Flag Day, yeah.
Flag Day. We have a quorum and a couple of absentees, and maybe a couple more folks might float in as we get started. I would like to make just an observation about my schedule today. I will be leaving here at exactly 10:59 a.m. Because I have another commitment and I shan't be late for it. And so I have asked if y'all are still in discussion on something, I've asked Sturgis if she wouldn't mind wrapping up the meeting with everybody, and she's agreed to do that. So with that as a backdrop, I want to jump right into our agenda if there's no objections, and I want to turn it upside down a little bit and start with number 7 and just hear from more status updates or needs from the folks who are leading these issues, starting with design standards. These are the 3 categories that I hope I captured correctly, that we all agreed to would be the way we wanted to deploy our resources on our path forward toward accomplishments in the near future. So if we could start with design standards, anyone have an update on where we are or thoughts about design standards?
So that's an easy one. I'm gathering material in electronic folders, but there's no plan forward as of yet. But there will be in a few weeks.
So Jeffrey, just kind of give us a taste of what do you think the next steps would be? Once you compile, what do you think?
I want to get our small group together and discuss, what I want to put out an outline about which design standards we want to reference and how we're going to educate the folks. Develop another presentation, basically,
Wonderful.
on design standards.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Can I take a step back because I missed the last meeting?
Certainly.
And ask, so I gather these are the 3 sort of areas of emphasis, and people were sort of signing up for which one they wanted to be.
This is what was gleaned from the exercise we went through when everybody spoke about what they were passionate about.
Right.
And so we categorized them into these 3 umbrella topics.
And are we each supposed to then be part of a subgroup on one of the topics? Is that the idea?
Well, we have champions for all 3 of these, and then I'm leaving it completely up to the champion.
Okay.
How you'd like to move forward.
Okay. Great. Because if there's a subgroup, that's
Yes.
probably the one I want to do.
So I'll leave that to Jeffrey to reach out and get his group together if it's not already together, and then we'll.
It's not, sorry to say.
It's fine.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. So we'll look forward to that in the coming agendas. Ordinance and enforcement, Ms. Sturgis.
I just, I've been to 2 meetings now as a member of the Law Oversight Committee, and their kind of way of working, if you're not aware of it, was to divide up sections of the tree code among the members of the committee and have those folks kind of take a stab at changing those to make them more consistent and simple and understandable and fair and all that kind, enforceable and all that kind of good stuff. And I'm a little bit at a disadvantage having joined as now a member, which even though I came to a lot of meetings and spoke from the audience, it's kind of different now that I'm sort of in the trenches. One of the things that I don't think anyone would dispute is that this has taken this group a long time to get to where they are with working on this. And so at the meeting, sort of from being a newcomer and also kind of observing that the process didn't seem to be moving ahead with any alacrity, I asked some kind of basic kinds of questions about, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And rather than maybe focusing on wordsmithing the current code, would we want to come back and look at what are the goals? And and I'm also depending a lot on Liz to let us know kind of what's doable, what's practical, because it's, in my opinion, the current code doesn't really all the time mesh with what the reality is on the, in the field. So at this point, I think the chair at the end of the meeting said, instead of looking at the sections again at next meeting, we're gonna maybe look at this in a more overall way. So I'm hoping to do that. I'm also hoping to go back and look at, Julie Davis shared with me her packet of information that she collected, which included some ordinances from other towns that were given to her. And so I want to go back and look at those. So we're moving ahead, kind of in a different direction. I know Susan Wood was there. She'd missed the meeting prior, and at the end of this meeting, she said, I think we're getting somewhere, which, and so I'd like to think maybe a little new blood, maybe I had some contribution to that. There's another thing that just occurred to me, and I just maybe wanted to put this out to our committee. I don't know if you're aware of it, but on June 3rd, the mayor and commissioners had a workshop meeting where they essentially took stabs at their vision for the city. And a lot of them, Tony and Dick, of course, were part of that. And as a person sitting in the audience, a longtime member, tree advocate on the Law Oversight Committee, one of the things that I kind of became aware of when I was listening to that was what I heard was maybe conflicts between goals, vision goals of those vision. And I'm just sort of wondering if this committee, I'm working on a letter personally to share my observations about 3 different sort of categories of those visions with the mayor and commissioners. But I also wanted to ask if we might not, as the tree committee, might want to communicate something to the mayor and commissioners about how we see maybe some items of, how we see some of those things that were spoken impacting on trees. I guess what I want to say is if we don't decide to do it as a group, I'm going to do it as an individual, regardless. But I wanted to sort of put that out to you guys. And if you want, what I'll do is bring my draft at the next meeting and let you see it and see if it's something you're interested in doing. Yes?
Question for you. I was just wondering, with the infrastructure presentation that Tony gave, was that taken into consideration? Should we represent that or present it to the group? Because that really talks about the vision of green infrastructure.
It does. I guess what I'm saying is one of the things that was characteristic of the presentation by the different members is that they were very detailed and they addressed things like parking, neighborhood preservation. I mean, there were a lot. It was very detailed. And so my approach was to go back and kind of put those things into sort of 3 general categories that kind of spoke to me.
So it was beyond visions into.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Yeah.
and just say, you'd like to address this. Now, here's a way that this may or may not, this might be a problem right here.
I'd like to interject.
Surely.
It was beyond vision for some commissioners. And what I would like to just have you consider is that the objective of that, and I'm so glad Dick is here as well to help my recollection and to keep me honest if I'm
old memories.
No, if I'm mischaracterizing, but the objective of that session was for the commissioners to really talk a little bit about what they see for the future under the rubric of vision. But where that information really goes now, my opinion, is planning commission. Because the intersection of of the discussion is the creation of the new CDP. So, Sturgis, think about how you want to, or where you want to intersect with your comments. Because to me, and Susan and Jeffrey and Bunky can speak to this, with the upcoming survey developed for and on behalf of if I'm articulating this correctly, the comprehensive development plan, that I hope within that survey, which will have a lot of impact from it and heft from it, because it's asking the community as well what their priorities are. That's going to be a really important step. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I agree with what Sturgis said. And I left with the impression that we were spot on in our earlier presentation about the environment and green and everything, unanimously across the board. 95% of what I heard general and even specific. Turf lawns are bad. I heard those words said more than once, and I was very excited about it. I did hear one comment that I haven't heard in any of our outreach before, though, that alarmed me, and like Sturgis, I thought needed immediate intervention, and it was, I can't have a tree taller than my house on a 50 by 100 lot. And so I had never heard large canopy translated to bigger than my house. So I was thankful to get that information, because I think maybe that is a very common concept that we can do some education around.
I hear that like at least once a week.
Okay. See, I
They
never heard that
they
before.
can't, they don't
Wait a
want
minute, let's have one conversation. Liz just offered, you hear
I
that?
heard
Say-
it
say that
yesterday.
again.
Oh, we can't retain this tree because we can't move the house over enough that the canopy won't be hanging over the new roof.
And so, what was the result of that tree?
The contractor told the designer, well, I think it's better if we just go to the park and shade tree and get the tree removed. And I've not seen any action. They had other redesigns they had to do, so we haven't seen any action since then. But that's what I would anticipate.
So this is a very interesting intersection of practical application versus intent. I'll just leave it at that. It's practical application versus
Is that new construction or
intent.
renovation?
Yeah.
And it's new construction. So that's very, very telling. And I must say, I've heard it as well from residents, that even the ones that have mature canopy trees on their properties with lots that are a bit bigger than 50 by 100, that they want those trees down because of liability. And as the trees age, they believe they become more and more of a threat to their property. So the intersection of all this, I think, is very, very interesting, and you're so right to bring it up from a standpoint of, does this committee need to be more proactive on something, or do we trust in the fact, which I know I do, we've got 3 members of the Planning Commission sitting right here that connect these dots very, very quickly. But if that's additional assistance that can be useful,
I think
that'd
it
be
is.
great.
I think it is.
That'd be great.
Because first of all, it represents this entire committee, and it's, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Dick, then
we lend auspices to, I think we have credibility to go before the planning commission, even in offices. We have mutual people involved, but I think, if we were to have one, written or statement or something from us, I think it would be.
And Bunky, you said planning commission, so I'm wondering, listening to Tony, I'm wondering if this should go to the planning commission and the mayor.
I think so.
Yeah,
And-
right,
and,
but I mean, I would say that this year in particular, and I think it's welcome that we're getting, some feedback or some, to have the visions from the mayor and commissioners at this point, I think is actually beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I was really happy to see the mayor
Yeah.
and commissioners, identify vision as something to work from. I thought that their detail, I kind of agreed with Stan's point that, maybe this is too detailed, but the devil's in the details. And so what you found out was what folks were thinking, and that's where the inconsistency showed up.
Yeah, I just want to say, Sturgis, thank you for bringing this up, because I think it is an important topic for this committee. And while I have great trust in the three of you that are on the Planning Commission, I would advocate for each of our city committees, you know, to be a part of this whole process and to feed into it, and particularly if there's consensus among a committee in terms of important things like you're bringing up. So I think you should feed into the process, and it should be the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners and Mayor, because the Planning Commission is charged legally with doing this. They are leading this, and our intent, and while it was perhaps a little vaguely presented to us in terms of what we were each supposed to do. You got 7 individuals who kind of interpreted this charge a little bit differently that day. I mean, I started out by saying calling this a visioning session is really a misnomer, because that's not what, you know, these aren't visions per se up here, if you get technical about doing strategic planning and so on. On the other hand, our intent was to feed into the process, and I'm glad that Bunky said what he just did, that it was helpful. And that's what we wanted to do, is to be helpful to this long-range planning process, and to be a part of it, a team player in it now, not too late in the game, where people are either surprised or upset or creating drama about it, but to do it now, well, we can really talk about it. And then the follow-up would be for us, as I believe as commissioners and mayor, to have some joint meetings, you know, I don't know, what, 1, 2, 3, over the course of the coming months with the Planning Commission, so that again, you know, we're learning from each other, we're putting the best information out there, we're listening to all of the people that are going to be a part of the survey.
Yeah, and for the public too, because that's really going to be
Yes.
the important part.
So on this agenda item, Sturgis,
Yes.
you will just, is there aside from what you've already spoken about, is there a separate next step, or you want to continue forward on how you've already explained it?
I think, I mean, I'm going to continue to be a member of the Law Oversight Committee. I'm going to continue to take, you know, our vision as a committee back to them. And, you know, the next for me is to produce that letter and then, you know, bring it back to you guys and let you take a look at it and see, you know.
In the meantime, like you were saying, if you want us to speak as a group, should we contact you and give us, you know, give you ideas of what our visions are, and that would be give you
Well,
some
I
guidance?
guess what I'd like to do is kind of give you the letter and let you see, yeah, and then have you guys say, you know, I mean, you know, this is just my stab, and we may do a better job as a group,
And in the short term, this is what I find most disturbing, is that Liz can so quickly agree that she hears what we hear, and unfortunately, the solution or the resolution is, let's go to the Parks and Shade Commission, and you can,
Or lawyers, that's the other
yes,
thing people
you can
do.
possibly get a workaround. So we may need to give some thought about, you know, it's so easy to teach people what to do. First time they see it, it's an instant, oh, I'll do that as well. So maybe that's something for us to think about, that how do you circumvent some practices that have already started to become entrenched. Okay, should we, Terry, did I skip you?
No, well, are we doing the?
No, I meant, did you have anything else for this agenda item, the one Sturgis was talking about? Okay. Education, public support, and involvement. Anybody?
So, well, Andrea unfortunately cannot be here.
Right.
She's been very ill this week. But basically, what's involved with, as far as the educational part, is this coming fall, we're planning to have hopefully some educational seminars with on different subjects in terms of you know, trees and landscaping, and we're hoping to get, I think it was Ashley from the Delaware Co-op Extension. So we're hoping to plan some of those for this fall. through various organizations, the VIA, the RBHA, and different things, the CC, Country Club Estates, hopefully. So we're working on some of that. And then as far as the involvement, I realized the Commemorative Tree program is kind of under that, but we're supposed to be talking about that in old business. Do you want me to address that now? Or
Sure.
Okay. So just real quickly, the update on that is that I've worked on the brochure. We've made it more concise. We've taken out a lot of the content and just made it a two-page type thing that we'll actually be meeting with, I'm blacking out, the
Chris Johnson?
Chris Johnson to talk about
In the
that.
future, can I interrupt? Because I specifically asked that you guys go through me for these things to limit the interruption to staff time, because Chris has a lot going on with the mayor and commissioners, police. So in the future with those things, please try to coordinate them through me.
So
that
Liz,
we don't burden her.
you'll always be our point of contact.
Yes.
Well, no, but I'm sorry to get interrupted, but no, what I was going to say, Liz, that I was going to set up with you a meeting on Monday when Andrea is feeling better, because we were going to run everything through you.
Okay, so you haven't touched base.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
perfect.
no. I
See,
said our
we're on the
future.
same page then.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no, I
'Cause
said
I
in
was
the
like, I
future it'll
know
go
we
through
were.
her, but no, that was one of my questions on my list was,
Perfect.
I've got to contact Liz and see if you're available on Monday.
Gotcha.
Because
Awesome.
Andrea hopefully will feel better by then. So everything will be run through you. Just an update on we've now met with both artists. We have both proposals on the tree for the lobby. There again, it'll be reviewed with you for decision.
Now, I think Andrea told me there was a little bit of a back and forth with one of them, so that's been resolved. Awesome.
I've met with both of them. They both have the same exact information.
Great.
And I met with
Yay.
both of them here in the lobby so they could measure it, take photographs and all of that.
Get the final, and we have the final,
Proposal, which,
have them, okay.
yeah, which that, there again, like I said, we were gonna make an appointment with you on Monday and run
Okay.
everything through you.
And then, you gonna be there too? Maybe?
No, the way I talked it out
Whoa,
with, Terry and Andrea was, as we loop Liz into where we are, as soon as you come forward with this is the choice, then I will be
Yay or nay?
very happy. No, I trust your judgment.
Oh, I don't know, all this trust.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yes, all this trust. I trust your judgment, and that's when I will make certain that the city manager, because you probably will have already looped her in, but I want to make sure she and the mayor, and then I will keep the commissioners informed. The last time I spoke to them about what our committee was doing, I mentioned we're getting very close to the selection of an artist for the commemorative tree that they had approved May of 2018. So they're getting some little teasers to remember where we are on this. And I'm so glad that I think
Oh, they've done so much.
y'all will come
Well, you
to-
included, but yeah.
y'all will come to an agreement on who you'd like to
I'm
recommend shortly.
I'm sure I'll probably like both of them, so.
And that may be the hard part.
You guys will have to choose.
That may be the hard part. So back to you, Terry.
Well, and the last thing I was gonna mention is we're on track as far as the dates, which I mentioned last time, which, our goal is to do plantings hopefully the first week in November, which we agreed through Liz. Have some kind of reception, which the tree installation will be done by the beginning of September, and we could have some kind of a reception for the, third week in September. Now, one thing I would ask.
Terry, before you move on to that, in case there's anyone listening to the live stream, could you talk a little bit about the plantings? You said there would be plantings?
Yes, well, the trees that would be, well, in terms of receiving contributions to plant trees.
Yes.
Which are to be planted solely on public property.
Yes.
By the city, depending on how many of those trees we have financed, by probably, I would say the beginning of October, what we're planning to do, and there again in coordination with Liz's schedule, she's agreed that the first week in November would be a comfortable time. And frankly, I'm hoping for maybe 30 trees. I hope that we can get that many. I don't think that's unrealistic to get contributions from people for trees to start planting.
And we hope that's a result of the educational seminars, the campaign, and the brochure.
Yes, and actually it really starts with the brochure and also with us speaking to our friends, neighbors, relatives, talking about this whole commemorative tree program, which, you know, one thing I was gonna mention, and I don't know, there again, I'd like to get your input, but, you know, I know that Sturgis, Susan and I have been on this MACT meeting for 2.5 years. And this is the first program where we actually have information and deadlines and support in various ways from the city to get trees planted in the ground on city property. So one of the things I was going to ask you, and there again, I'd like your input, is I was really hoping that each of us could maybe contribute to planting a tree. And if you can't do it by yourself, maybe get your family members together and even start with the lowest tier is the $350 tier. And if each of us could maybe commit to that, or like I said, maybe, you know, contact our friends and neighbors, everybody pitch in $50 at a time. But I think that would be a great way to show that we're behind this program, we support it, and it would be great to get started. And incidentally, there's already 3 of us on the committee that have committed to buying a tree. So we have 3 to start.
You know what might be cute too is if you just did, everybody donated $50 individually in the committee and just had one from the committee. Yeah, that would be that'd be cute, I think. Charming.
But if somebody wanted to buy a tree by
Individually.
themselves.
Yeah, no, I was saying that
Or,
too.
you know, buy
Yeah.
for your family, or, you know, if you have family.
Well,
members.
let's do this on that topic. As you get a little bit further with the selection of the artist and so forth, and the finalization of the educational materials and looping in
Chris.
the communications director here, then it'll give everybody a chance to kind of think about this. And the next time we talk about commemorative tree, maybe we can take Liz's idea for a communal one, plus some individuals, and talk that out in a little more detail.
And we'll be
next
able
time.
to turn, hopefully, the brochure into like a PDF or something to put on the website as well, I'm hoping.
Definitely.
Now, is there so there's no money in that program right now, right?
Well, I budgeted for the art itself out
Okay.
of,
But I mean, for the planting, there's nothing been collected yet.
as donations,
Yeah.
no.
But don't you have a backlog of names of people who want to donate?
Mhm,
Okay, so that would be, you'd be able to go to them right off the bat.
Yeah.
And
Well,
say, look at the program.
Yeah,
we need
to
now.
see if people
Okay.
are, yeah, because
If they're still
I have
interested.
people, I had somebody call me the other day, I was like, you told me you'd have some information in the spring, and I'm like, well, I do have some information.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, people are still interested.
I think
Okay.
hopefully what we can tell people is, you know, this is going forward. We already know that each of you have the level of the tiers of contribution. So you can say to people, we're hoping to get this started. We're going to be asking for contributions through the summer. The tree installation will happen in September, with the plantings in November. But we can start talking to people already and say, look, if you would even get started with a first tier tree, you know, maybe the 5 of us in our family can contribute or whatever.
So
Because
what
I'd like to do the contributions during the summer.
Yeah, so
in
what
July and
I've
August.
told the last person that called was, they were asking about price, which I had the pricing and the way the program is gonna work, but I said, I don't wanna have you commit to anything until we have finalized like our marketing and picked our artists, which we're in the process of doing right now. So I think once we can nail those couple of things down, hopefully really quickly, we'll be okay to start.
So Liz,
contacting
just
people.
clarify one thing for me, the
Mhm.
mitigation fund.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at Dick because he will continue in his role of commissioner, and I will not in a few months. But it is my expectation that that mitigation fund is an opportunity to answer Susan's question, which is, there is funding
Well, no,
available.
but my understanding was that the mitigation fund, you use that for annually, for maintenance and your own annual plantings, as opposed to this program. That's what I was
It
asking.
could be for, well,
If it could be for this, that would be great.
Well, let me just say this, I don't want to digress into a discussion about the mitigation fund, but maybe Dick, you and I
Yes.
can talk a little bit about expectation, because I may have a completely different expectation of how those funds should be viewed
Okay.
and what they should be earmarked for going forward.
Nah,
And
they wouldn't be able to go, because these would be donations, so they would go into their own account. They would not go
of
into
course,
part of the
I'm not
mitigation.
suggesting
Okay.
that. I'm talking about
That's
the
the-
current mitigation fund and the monies that are in it.
Is to be used for the maintenance, preservation, planting of trees on city property.
There you go.
So that's the
Legally.
whole ball of wax.
To me, it is the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
So, and it answers Susan's question, I believe, that there should always be a fund that can support, aside from individual contributions, which come along with individual recognition and so forth, there is a fund intended to support our activities. And we can just leave that there because it's not on our agenda to talk about that. Back to you, Terry.
No, I was just going to ask Liz, but I had heard, just one last point on that, are there stipulations as far as how much of that can be spent each year? The
Well, it's
mitigation
however
fund?
much we budget for.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yes,
whatever we request and the commissioners approve.
Okay.
And I think it will be very important as the new budget is created for the next round, and Dick will be part of that process to get real clarity around the expectation of the mitigation fund.
Well, and we do have to be really careful about using that money to supplement what should actually be funded out of the general fund too. Like, we can't be relying on those mitigation fees because what if they dry up and I've had no
Understood.
budget? So
it seems like to me it's been, in practice, it's been like an endowed fund, that you don't use all of it every year, you use a portion of it every year so that it doesn't run out.
yeah, I
right?
think they kind of, when I started, they took the amount of money divided by the amount of years that it had been in place, and then we started budgeting that amount per year. So like
Okay,
a self-sustaining.
I'm gonna end this discussion on
much
the
money.
mitigation fund. It is, and I'm gonna say it again, it is not on the agenda. And this is intended to be just a status of our commemorative tree program. So we'll tackle that as time goes on as well.
I have one other question though about the program. Your goal was to do 30 this fall?
Well, I mean, ideally, I would like that by November. That's just
So
kind of a goal.
is $350 the price of one tree?
It's the minimum.
I think
price.
that's
No, but I mean,
minimum.
okay, so, so 10,500, I just did my calculation. That's what we basically need to make it happen?
Well,
Right.
it's not that it needs to make it happen. I mean, even if we only got 6 contributors, we would plant that. But in my mind, I'm just kind of shooting for 30. I think that would be a nice number to
Yeah, it
try
would
to
be.
start having.
It's an internal goal.
Yes, exactly. And then, so my last point, which I had down here, was Liz, I'll talk to you afterwards about meeting with you on Monday. And Andrea hopefully will be well by then.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, so that is what we have at the moment for education, public support, and involvement. And what I'd like to say to all 3 members who have led our discussion today, this really, and it's just my opinion, sets this group up for some very clear progress as we move forward. The way it's structured and the folks that are wanting to lead certain segments of this, I think this is a very powerful way to think about what we've got and how to move forward. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to topping trees discussion. And I know this
Could
is,
I ask,
yes,
do you want to go back to Arbor, get rid of Arbor Day 2020?
no.
You don't, got it? Oh, yep.
So topping trees. And I think the person who has the most passion at the moment around topping trees is Sturgis Dodge.
Well,
And you want to
it's
talk a little
possible.
bit
I
about
think
it?
There's some shared passion.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things I just wanted to say is, I'm sure Liz was responsible for this, and thank you so much.
Yes, I
For this. And in case you guys didn't see this June 4th article in the Cape Gazette, this is really a great article. And it talked about volcanoes, mulch volcanoes and topping, which was really cool. I guess I wasn't sure, when I saw this item on the agenda, I wasn't sure if someone had requested it or Tony, if you specifically.
No, at our
had
last
it.
meeting, it was, I highlighted it in pink.
Okay.
For next agenda was
Okay.
topping trees.
Well,
And folks wanted to talk about that. There was
Right.
even a suggestion at the time, along with a brief crepe myrtle discussion.
okay.
There was a thought that someone had of possibly a moratorium on topping trees at some point, but that's quite a different process. But, so that's why it's on our agenda, because the group thought it might best have a few minutes to talk about it.
I actually heard a moratorium on planting crepe myrtles, is what I recall. Anyway.
Just because people.
Just the way that I wanted to speak to this is because one of the things I did on the Law Oversight Committee is that I went through the code and created a document that identified every section in there that I thought worked against trees. And one of the ones that I found, there is an item in there that says, neither shall trees be topped on public nor private property. The place where it becomes a problem is when it comes to enforcement. Because at enforcement, when you get to the current code, it says, you know, anybody that violates any of this code is a violator. They're against, you know, and they should suffer the consequences. And then it goes on to say, anyone removing a tree without a permit or, you know, shall be fined. But there's nothing, there are no penalties in the current code for anything other than illegally removing a tree. So the current code doesn't, there's no punishment. It also kind of says that in the current code, it says that landscaping and tree services who violate the law shall, you know, are subject to, well, it says if they do the same thing, if they take out a tree without a permit, they can have their license revoked for 2 years. But the penalties are only for removing a tree. So it's one of the things that on the Law Oversight Committee, you know, we're going to be looking at is making sure that if we say these are punishable offenses, that there's actually punishments. So, you know, given how things, I mean, the only thing, you know, right now we're kind of in an education and a learning place. And I'm just sort of wondering, I'm just floating this idea, if we and or the city would like to possibly communicate to licensed landscaping and tree service companies that work in our city to remind them that practice tree topping and taking out lateral branches aggressively are against our code. I mean, we can't punish them, but we could remind them. It's just an idea.
I totally agree. I talked to Sturgis yesterday. On my street alone, it's almost like it's contagious. We had one neighbor that had gorgeous high canopy oaks, and they decided that there was not enough sunlight on their shrubs below, and they took out all of the lateral branches 35 feet high. And then their neighbor saw that and thought, oh, that's kind of cool, let's do that. The neighbor across the street saw it. And then yesterday I was out walking, excuse me, on Girard Avenue, and I'm just using this as an example because, excuse me, it's almost contagious. People see this, but they look like telephone poles.
Yeah.
They literally look like telephone poles. I call them lollipop trees because they take the lateral branches and they trim the tops. They don't, you know, don't top them actually to kill them or harm them, but they trim them enough so they look like a telephone pole with some greenery on top. So it provides no shade. It's aesthetically horrible looking. And I cannot believe that these companies, and I saw it was Sussex Tree and it was Passato and some of these major companies, is there any way that we can send notices to them to say, cutting lateral branches, you can't do this? And some of them were literally 12 inches in diameter.
But
Liz,
let me
is there
ask
anything we can do?
let me ask a question and clarification. In order to go down your line of thinking, wouldn't there have to be something in the code that says that you can't do something?
But it does say in lateral,
It's in there.
it does say
So,
lateral.
okay,
It says
so,
it says hat racking or like stubbing back up the branches
But does it
and
say,
or topping.
does it say anything
It doesn't say
that you can't remove more than 10% of the canopy or anything?
It says
Yeah, it needs to be more specific.
severe cutting back of lateral branches and canopy
needs to be in
or
other words.
topping or hat racking trees is expressly
So like severe cutting
prohibited.
back of lateral branches would be like stubbing them, not really,
because I was going, well,
not really
Well, that's removing
raising,
them.
not really too much raising.
35 feet?
Yeah, I
but
mean,
isn't that the issue? That when you use terminology like severe,
Yeah.
it becomes open to
Very
the
subjective.
question, well, what is severe? So what I'm trying to do here is get to, okay, it is clear that this committee probably is not in favor of what you're describing. and real examples around town. But what is it that's at the core of it that we think we could have an impact on? Is it education, or is it the wording in the code to begin with, plus it sounds very clear, and Liz, I would depend on you on this, that there are really no repercussions
If you,
as a result of the way the code is written.
I mean, if you really want to construe the code in a certain way, there's a section that says any violations of the approved tree plan or something to that effect, anything not in conformance can lead to the revocation or holding of a permit. So theoretically, we could say that topping is removing a tree without permit, possibly, but that's a stretch legally to argue that. It needs to be a combination of information, education, and then the code with teeth to back it
Is
up.
it practical to believe that education could make a difference in choices?
I hope so, or else the whole world is wrong. I mean,
But the suggestion was to do some education with the vendors. That's what I'm asking. If you've got vendors who are already doing this, what are the chances that educating those same vendors would have an impact on choices that they may be making at the request of who's paying them?
I think
the homeowners.
I think you're better going for homeowners than vendors necessarily.
Let me ask you this. If you're gonna get your tree trimmed, there's no city, you don't have to pay a fee for that, right? So you don't know anything about that. So the only thing that's really happening is somebody's gonna do this and you're gonna see they did it, right? And then you're gonna,
Maybe.
and then conceivably, if we wanna have an active group, get you guys, would go back and basically file a protest with the property owner and say, hey, look, you didn't adhere to this, what's dictated in the tree ordinance relative to hat racking and all this other kind of stuff. So it would really behoove, I mean, the city, you're not gonna do anything about it, right? I mean, you could conceivably do that, but I don't know if you're gonna do that.
Conceivably
and
do
whether-
what?
That you would protest, you would go to the property owner and say, hey, you just did something you shouldn't have done.
I think
And-
the
and we're
city
gonna-
really wants the enforcement out of, not for us to be riding around. Number one, I don't have the time.
Right, no, but I'm
I
just
don't
saying.
think that goes with our-
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If there was, let's say, an active voice here that would basically become aware of the fact that somebody did this, and you're gonna see it immediately after it's done, that if we called you and said, hey, look, somebody such and such did this to the tree, what are you gonna do about it? Or would this group, would such a group effectively go to the city and say, hey, this was done, and what are you gonna do about it, whatever. I mean, all I'm getting at is, the issue is, there's nothing really specified with regard to enforcement that dictates such and such will happen. But if somebody puts somebody's feet to the fire, would that move things along? I guess I don't
Okay,
know.
well, here's what I'm thinking. The trees that I've seen, these are mature, high canopy trees that are 100 feet tall. First of all, a homeowner, of course, is not going to attempt to take out lateral branches that are 12 or 14 inches in diameter. So here's my thought. You would only hire a professional to do that.
Of course.
So where it starts is, I believe we have to be more specific in terms of lateral branches that are, just like we talk about, when we talk about the size of a trunk of a tree, we talk 4 feet up, and this is the inches, the calipers. We should somehow, with Liz and maybe Katie, because she's a landscape architect too, specify any lateral branch that's more than 3 inches in diameter at the base where it attaches to the trunk is considered a lateral branch, and we should send notifications, I believe, to these companies that are doing it, because homeowners are not cutting off these branches. It's professional companies. They need to be notified that we've changed whatever we can change. These are the specifics, and if you disobey that, you will lose your license or be fined, whatever.
Well, I don't know if they will. That's what I'm saying. I mean.
Yeah, but if you see them, but that way you can go to the company, because you're gonna see their
Right,
truck.
but all I'm getting at is, the city's not enforcing this. They're not
But
enforcing
she's saying the code should be.
Yes.
rewritten
Right,
so
but
that
again,
the
but
code is
until
specific,
you,
right.
either
Until
way,
you do that,
what I'm saying is, you're gonna bring it to the attention of the public, you're gonna bring it attention to the property owner, you're gonna bring it attention to the landscape companies, the tree service companies. But all I'm getting at, until you actually have you know damn well that some, if somebody makes us think about it, they're gonna say, well, there's something here that talks about enforcement, blah, 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 and somebody's gonna, it's just not gonna go anywhere.
Well, let me make a suggestion. We were talking about educating, I'm sorry.
Go, but
Because it sounds like it'll be a while before this code language, gets changed. And you're talking about educating the homeowner, and I agree with Liz, it would be good to educate the homeowner. But it may also be a matter of educating, giving very basic information to the companies. Why wouldn't the city send out with their license
Exactly.
guidelines, just once a year, to reinforce these are our guidelines?
Exactly.
So educate both groups, basically.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
And be specific.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying,
Yeah.
talk about, just like they
Right.
talk about a caliper on a tree trunk,
Right.
talk about the diameter of the branches.
Right.
Anything over 2 inches is considered.
But Susan, could you clarify what you just said? That until the code language is changed, who's gonna be changing the code language?
Well, the
That's
LLC's
what you're
working on
working
this.
Is that a part of what law oversight is looking at? Is that
That's my
included?
question.
Yeah, but even then, when's that?
We're
gonna
looking at all things that don't make sense, but it may be a while.
Right.
And before.
So I'm saying we should put the information out,
Well, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, my feeling is, I guess to me, a more stark example is tree topping or hat racking. And I would certainly hope that the tree companies know that it's against our code to do that. And at the very least, they would offer professional advice to someone asking for it and saying, do you know that this is not an approved way of treating your tree, and that this is actually going to, I mean, the information's right here, it's in the city
Surgeons,
thing.
they don't.
That-
I've seen major
the-
companies.
Wait, let me ask a question.
They don't know.
Liz, are they well educated in the practices that are good for trees versus those that are not
Do
particularly good for
arborists
trees?
know that topping trees is wrong?
Yes, yes.
and all these companies have.
But-
And they all
arborists.
have arborists.
But,
But they're not all arborists.
What's the but?
They
You
have
say-
arborists, so it's different.
well, this tree's gotten too big for my property, I want it chopped in half, and I've been in this position, you try to explain it to them,
Yeah.
well, here's why we don't do this, here's what we can do instead, here's some other options, blah, blah, blah. No, I want it cut in half. So you either walk away, if you're a good arborist, and say, well, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to find somebody else.
Right.
Or you say, well, this isn't, I'm not gonna provide any guarantees, and this is against my ethics and my code,
And it might kill it and blah, blah, blah.
and I'm gonna make you sign something, say this could kill the tree, but I'm gonna take my $1,000 commission and I'm gone.
Okay, let me say something about this. It seems like we are not ready to actually solve the tree topping issue today. It sounds like we have some education ideas, whether they're practical or not. We need to have maybe a more in-depth discussion about that, as well as, it seems like the Law Oversight Committee may be instrumental at some point in doing something, and we don't know the timeline on that yet. So maybe we should give Sturgis some additional time with the LOC, Law Oversight, to see how that develops.
I think it crosses all three committees. I think everybody has a role for care for large canopy trees.
And maybe trying to define that, especially with where our role is and how we can advance the ball, would be helpful. So how about I keep this on our agenda for next time and going forward? We'll just keep tree topping discussion, unless we want to broaden that to,
I think it's more than just
somebody
topping
give me some language.
I think it needs broadened too.
Yeah, I think it's more than topping trees.
Tree, you wanna say tree maintenance, that would include mulching, bad burning.
Improper tree
Yeah, I just,
maintenance.
Get it under one umbrella.
You know,
Improper.
Yeah, including the over mulching.
Improper, all,
The
all,
mulching and the lack
all
of-
things improper.
Yeah.
I like that. I like all things improper.
That's the goal.
And Jeff, you're the head of that committee to present that.
Sturgis,
You're a subchapter over
Are you aware if the law oversight has specifically looked at what you were telling us about, or that pertains to our
Trying to think
discussion here?
who had that part of it, but, I mean, we've discussed it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I could go back and kind of look.
Like they'll
Interesting.
still keep topping and lion's tailing as prohibited, but they're not gonna put in other like more minor non-ANSI approved pruning methods like over raising a tree. That'll never go into a code. It can't. I've never seen that. I mean, even as like intense as I've seen where you have to get a permit if you're pruning more than 10% of tree canopy. They don't even have that.
Okay.
So that's not a feasible thing to enforce. It could be part of your education. Here's how you get more light. It's not from elevating branches.
Right.
It's from thinning.
Yeah.
Right? So that can be part of education, and you're much better off with education as your first step than penalties. But you need
Well,
to have the penalties there.
You know what occurs to me, and then we'll close this discussion and keep it on the agenda for next time, is that the seminars in the fall, to me, if I believe we see this sporadically all over town, what we're talking about, it seems like that would be a great topic for the fall discussions of tree maintenance, all things improper.
Yeah.
Picture,
You know?
yeah, you have a picture of volcano
Yeah.
mulch, picture of
Right.
regular mulch, proper,
Because
improper,
to me, it really starts with the homeowner.
and why.
It really does.
I mean, I called Sussex
Yeah.
Tree last year to get my trees thinned,
Mhm.
which I'm glad to hear Liz say, to get more light.
Yeah.
It's, you thin them, you don't do other
Lower branches,
extreme
exactly.
I mean, you
methods
can
to them.
pull,
Yeah.
like, you can pull up
Yeah.
some lower branches, but there's a
Yeah.
ratio in there in the ANSI pruning standards. You can't raise more than 1/3 of the, whatever it is, but
Okay. Okay, so this will be on our agenda next time, tree maintenance, all things improper. So can we move for just a few minutes to Arbor Day?
Yep.
Which is the last thing on the agenda before any other comments from members or whatever. Arbor Day.
Okay, I'm meeting this afternoon with the teachers to do a debriefing with them, and then I'll be circling back to Liz and Andrea and Nick and to share that information. They're about to close the school and go on vacation, so I'm grabbing them while I can grab them.
Excellent.
nice.
Is today their last day?
Maybe, if not.
Oh, I think so.
It might be their
Close.
last day,
Okay.
so I'm gonna be doing that. The other thing, you know, Andrea and I are talking, she has some ideas about music that might let you off the hook next year, which to me, unless you don't want
like
to.
that.
No, uh-oh, he's
Whatever
pouting.
you need.
Okay.
You know,
Whatever you
Sturgis,
donate.
the fan club might push
I
back.
agree, I'm sure. Well, anyway, we may sort of include, we may make the tent bigger, okay? And so, oh, goodness gracious. Okay, so, in addition to that, Andrea I've been talking to her from on her sick bed, and she has this idea, and this is why I'm a little bit confused right now, because I'm not sure how much room in the city Liz has to put trees. And I'm hearing you say you want 30 in September. Well, Andrea's looking at 30 in the spring for the 30th anniversary.
Sturgis,
Yes,
I asked Liz recently in a meeting,
yeah,
how many trees potentially could we plant in
Yeah.
the city? And Liz,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, and I wrote it down, 800. You gave me the number.
Well, that was
800.
like the vacant street spaces.
Exactly.
okay.
But that-
How doable is that, Liz?
How doable is
I mean,
what?
finding an area that's large enough, doing it despite property owner pushback, budget, paying for it, maintaining it?
The budget would be well, it depends on what size trees. If they're trying to plant street trees, I mean, that'll be over $15,000 for 30 trees.
Got it.
Now, if we're trying to plant like small trees in the woods, you can get those for like $10.
Okay.
So it just
Do you want to
depends.
put small trees in the woods?
Well, yeah, we have certain areas that we're in the process of restoring,
Okay.
and yeah, in certain areas that maybe aren't regenerating as well as I would
Okay.
like.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
big picture, Arbor Day.
Right.
When I think about the event at the school, can we do something about the size of the tree that we plant at the school?
Please.
Instead of a twig, can we do something larger?
That was a 2-inch tree, guys.
But Liz, how much
Can
did
we,
that cost?
stop, can we do something larger? Or
I
would- or
physically
would your
can't, no.
recommendation be no?
No, my recommendation is no. That's
Okay,
about the ideal size in
You don't
terms of
necessarily
survival.
survive that well when they get bigger.
okay.
Yeah.
Plus, they don't
Terry?
grow, if they're bigger, they don't grow as fast.
Yeah, they find that like the larger the tree is, the small ones catch up to them. So that's the perfect size tree where nobody's gonna mow over it. We can still have 2 people plant it in-house without coordinating, hiring a landscaper and making sure they get it planted in the right spot at the right time. And
Terry?
Liz, my question is, the tree that was planted for Arbor Day this year, what was the entire planted price of that, including the tree and planting it?
I don't remember, honestly.
Approximately.
$200 for the tree, maybe.
And that included the planting?
Well, we did the planting, so.
And that was 2 inches, that's a
Yeah.
2-inch tree?
What was it this year? What kind?
It was a swamp
It was
oak.
I think it
was
was
an oak.
swamp
Swamp
white.
oak.
Swamp white oak.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
So
looks
Liz-
very
Liz-
good, by the
Liz,
way,
we'll
right
be
now.
talking with you
Does it?
So
about
much rain.
how many
Okay.
trees we could afford. I mean, I've got no problem with them being little trees in the woods.
Well, I mean,
that
if we
makes
wanna
up,
get the kids more in, I mean,
Yeah.
it depends on what we want to do. Because
Yeah.
you can do, that's what we used to do for Million Trees Volunteer Days, is we'd have all the trees, the holes dug, the trees staged on site,
Okay,
planting demonstration, and they'd put them in the ground and tuck them in. And
good, yeah,
so it's just,
good,
Depends on what you
We'll-
wanna do.
We'll be talking
Yeah.
with you.
Okay, so Sturgis, you'll tell us next meeting, we'll keep this on the agenda,
Okay.
how
good.
things went with the teachers at the school,
Yes, yes,
and we'll go from there.
okay. Yep,
That's everything that is on our agenda.
Did we,
It's
did we
11:59.
have minutes to approve?
10:59.
No, we do
56.
not, for today.
she's 3 minutes early.
No, I am. Any citizen comment? No, citizens to be heard from. Our next meeting will be same day as the planning commission.
right, I think it's the 12th, right?
That sounds right. I looked at it, but,
I will miss that one.
okay.
July 12th.
Right, this is fine.
July 12th at 10 a.m. And if there's nothing else,
Do you want to do a round? Make sure everybody said their piece?
that's what I'm asking. Any last comments, any membership comments, committee comments?
The only other comment I wanted to make was regarding the next meeting's discussion of the topping and so forth. I think we need to incorporate something that addresses the utility companies.
That's a good point. I was gonna use the-
It's all under design, design standards.
Okay. All right, going once, twice. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. What a group. What a group. I'm just saying.
sold.
No, I should have. Thank you, Ann. We are just adjourned.